We are
Hello, my
live.
darling.
We welcome everyone. We had our typical Monday technical difficulties. Becky was froze. We couldn't get her unfroze, so we were trying real hard. She's froze again. So anyway, but welcome everyone. Welcome to the Beyond Nutrition Community podcast. We're glad you're here because you know what? This is a space for you to slow down, tune in, and start rebuilding your health from the inside out. So, we're your host. I'm Sherri, and this is Becky, and we're just two women who've been where you are. Overwhelmed, exhausted, disconnected from our own bodies. We have lived it. We've moved through it, and we actually have rewritten our stories. In fact, we're still rewriting our stories, but not with quick fixes, right? Or pushing harder, but with a slow, steady healing and a return to what's real. We're here to walk with you as you learn to trust your body and honor nature's rhythms and create sustainable health in every part of your life. This is a place for honest conversation, gentle support, and a community that reminds you that you're not alone in this. So if you're craving calm, clarity, and a deeper connection to yourself, well, you found your people and you're in the right place.
All right, we're going to hope that I'm not froze. I'm going to assume that I'm not, right?
No, you're
Anyway,
froze, but keep talking.
good Lord. Gotta love technology, right? And being in the middle
Right.
of nowhere. So, anyway, gosh. Um, Tonight, I'm really excited. I know you are as well. To bring on our guest. I've known our guest for about going on 7 years now. James is James is a coach behind the PTJM method, a result-driven approach built on intensity, structure, and accountability based in northeast of northeast of England. He works with clients both in person and online. So it doesn't matter whether you're over here stateside or whether you're over there with him. He delivers a no-nonsense standard that cuts through the noise of the fitness industry. His method is heavily influenced by high-intensity training principles, focusing on progressive overload, controlled execution, and doing the work that most people like to avoid, including myself. James has built his reputation by rejecting the quick fixes, the fad programs, and the shred culture instead of prioritizing long-term results that last beyond just the season, which kind of goes along with us, right? Through his coaching, the content and the platforms include the PTJM show. Make sure you guys check that out. We'll post a link for it too. He's known also for telling people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear, and living and training as a type 1 diabetic himself. He brings a level of real world discipline and resilience and underpins everything that he does. His philosophy is simple: train hard, recover properly, and execute with intent, because results come from stimulus, not time spent.
Welcome.
Welcome, sir.
Am I live?
You are
You are
live.
live.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you having us on. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. It's only taken us, 6 years of knowing each other to actually get you on, but who's counting?
Yeah. Thanks to COVID and carnivore and all that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's kick it off with you grew up locally. What about, your upbringing shaped you into the work ethic and kind of your relationship with this training and the method that you've created?
I guess from a very, very young age, I was encouraged to exercise. I started basically class-based exercise when I was 6, martial arts. And it kind of just grew from there. Whether that was martial arts or school-based activities. Then when I was old enough, I managed to get into a gym, and never looked back from there, really.
Very nice. And so when you got into that training, what frustrated you most with like the industry and kind of, not only as a child growing up in, being in that, right? Because obviously I come from a small town, so we didn't have gyms, we didn't have, anything like that. But what kind of, when you first got into it or even now frustrates you the most about the industry?
I think, like always, Bruce, there's just a lot of noise. Everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel. It's not it's not that difficult. You go to the gym. You don't have to go to the gym at all. You can do it at home. You just got to fucking train hard. Sorry for swearing, by the way. You've just got to train hard, and I guess it's something that's been instilled in me since I was very, very young, that you've just got to be better than you were yesterday. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. In terms of frustration with the industry, you've got a lot of coaches and PTs now who claim to be PTs and coaches who probably haven't even done anything. They've done a course for a couple of weeks or whatever it may be. They've got a couple of letters after their name, and then all of a sudden they're a coach. It's funny and it's upsetting at the same time because they are engaging with people who are looking for help, who might be vulnerable for whatever reason, on their journey, whatever stage they are on their journey, and these people are grabbing a hold of them and filling them full of shit, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you, right? Because that would be like, I could go through the National Academy of Sports Medicine where, I got other training through, right? And they do have a PT program. So sure, I could end up and get it, but that doesn't necessarily mean I know, jack diddly of being able to go into, a gym and start training someone, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from on that side of the letters and the credentials don't necessarily make a good coach.
Yeah, I mean, don't get us wrong. I mean, there's probably hundreds of coaches out there who are more experienced than me. But I've still spent decades building up my knowledge base and developing myself through trial and error in terms of coaching and training, and finding a way that works. Now, obviously, what works for one doesn't work for another. Everybody's different, which is understandable, but there are some hard and fast rules, which is what I've come to base my current method on. The main one is just hard work. It's not pretty. It's not, it's not worthy of social media content where you've got well, we'll probably get into this later on, but we may as well broach it now. Where you haven't got your gym sets on, you don't look like you've just stepped off a fucking catwalk. You haven't looked like you've worked hard, but with social media content and your views, you've got your arse out, you've got your tits out. That's just women, by the way, not just the men.
But there's also men on that side of it too, where many men aren't actually training hard, and that's at what kind of turning point? Because I know your method, right, has gravitated and evolved into the method that it is today. And at what turning point did you finally realize that most people don't actually train hard enough? I mean, sure, even like myself, right? I use my resistance bands. I end up, could it be harder? Sure, right? But when did you realize that most people aren't actually training hard enough?
I think that's all based on results. If someone was training hard enough, then they would get the results that they were aiming for. But as well as if they've got someone there, saying, well, you could probably do a little bit more. I think that goes along with it. A lot of my clients often say that, they train on their own, but they can't push themselves the same way that they do when they're with me. Which is understandable because, if you've got a training partner there, they can, one more. There's always one more rep, whether that be with resistant bands like yourself, Becky, or in a commercial gym or wherever it may be. I think people perceive failure, shall we say. There's a perception of failure.
I think the perception is also an easy, quick, I did enough mentality, or, I'm just going to end up and stop mentality, right? They don't, they don't like getting out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, it's all about comfort zones at the end of the day. There's a reason why people do things, and that is comfort zones. They're quite comfortable going into a gym, ticking a box, doing a few reps on a few machines, and then walking out. And as far as they're concerned, they've been to the gym. They can tell their friends, what did you do today? Oh, I've been to the gym. But the question should really be, what did you do? Did you work hard enough? Did you work to failure? I mean, don't get us wrong, working to failure isn't pretty. It's not nice. In fact, makes you feel sick, sometimes. And there's a reason why people don't want to do it. For those reasons that I've just explained, it's not nice. A lot of people just want to go to the gym, like you say, tick a box, done it, go for a fucking smoothie afterwards, and yeah, and fair enough, that's okay. But those are the people that will complain later on that they're not where they want to be in terms of physical development or body fat or muscle or whatever it might be.
Yep. When they're not able to maintain that lean muscle mass. And I just got off a coaching session that we were discussing the same thing, right? Looking for weight loss. Well, it's not necessarily all just fat loss that you need to end up and be worried about. It's, your body composition and the lean muscle mass, and, making sure that as you're losing weight, you are maintaining that lean muscle mass. Well, movement, activity, and training is all part of being able to maintain that. So how has your exercise changed now that you are living with type 1 diabetes?
So I'll just kind of reverse back a little bit to when I first started. I bought Mr. Schwarzenegger's Modern Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, and that became my Bible for a few years. Until I realised that you didn't have to train twice a day for 2 or 3 hours, because you either had school or work. For me at that time, those were the two options. So I kind of fell into the routine of, right, I've got an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it might be. I need to get in, get it done. So I discovered Doreen Yates, Mike Mensa, Arthur Jones type of training. Fast forward to August last year, I was getting ready for a strongman competition, and I just knew something wasn't right. So I went to the doctors, got checked out. Turned out I had type 1 diabetes, which apparently had been, to quote their words, sleeping, or laying dormant. So obviously that was a massive change. Quite a big shock as well, obviously. Quite a big adjustment in terms of lifestyle and training as well. Having to manage food, especially around training, and more so recently the type of training that I do. So yeah, I've kind of fell back into that sort of high intensity, sort of get in, couple of warm-up sets, work your ass off. Are you going to die? Yeah. But did you? No. Okay, fair enough. Go again. Kind of training, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I agree. It doesn't take the 2-3 hours. And I think a lot of people are coming around to the fact that the training can end up and be done, in a shorter, be effective, right? Utilizing your time and being very effective with that in the way that you are doing it. And, obviously, like I said, we've known each other for 6, almost 7 years now at this point. And your routine has evolved, right? And your day-to-day has obviously, changed, but also nutrition wise, has changed, right? Talk about with the type 1 diabetes, how you kind of end up and go about that. Cause I know there are some carbs and stuff that you're putting in there, and even protein wise, how has that all changed?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we go back to 6-7 years ago, pandemic time, when I came across the carnivore type of eating, which I kind of think, looking back, was a novel thing to do, just because it was pandemic and I was bored. So let's just have it right. You're looking for something to do because you can't fucking do anything because you're locked down. So I started the carnivore diet, and then obviously integrated into the carnivore community, which is obviously where I met yourself, Becky. But evolving from that, the introduction of carbohydrates, which are a necessity. Let's have it right, they are. But in terms of the type 1 diabetes, like you were mentioning there, it's the type of carbohydrates that you might eat, whether that be pre or post workout, or first thing in the morning, or even last thing at night. Contrary to popular belief, you can't eat carbs quite late. You aren't going to get fat. There are things you can and can't eat, but again, it depends on the individual. I think.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest point is, there's so many low carb, keto, carnivore spaces around type 1 diabetes, and, the whole Bernstein method and that side of things, right? And I get it. And if that works for them, great. But we've also had April on. April's a type 1 diabetic as well. She's been able to incorporate other foods, have a little bit more diversity. She's, planning those and adjusting those based on her activity. Now she notices a difference, whether, it's like strength training, whether it's walking, whether, what the intensity is of that training, as to, how she kind of adjusts the nutrition, and she just adjusts accordingly, right? So being able to uptake that. Now, I know you made the comment, that you have to adjust based on your high intensity or post workout. Do you, how does that end up and look, I guess? Because I know for me, when I like Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, I will do my resistance training. Those are the days that I have, anywhere 35 to 40% from carbohydrates because I'm uptaking that, right? I don't have any, blood sugar issues or anything like that as far as, the carbs factor. How do you end up, and do you structure it based on the day, or do you structure it based on how you're feeling?
I tend to structure based on how I'm feeling. I will structure based on how hard I trained and how I feel afterwards. Sometimes that might mean very, very minimal carbohydrate intake. Similarly, sometimes that'll mean eating a whole loaf of bread, but just jabbing a few extra IUs of insulin just to cope with it, But over time, I've come to learn what works for me, and that's just through trial and error. So yeah, I just go off feel personally, and I do work with a few clients who are diabetic, and I just push. How do you feel? How do you feel? Because that's ultimately that's all it's based on, is how you feel.
Yep.
If you've trained hard enough, say for example, and you've smashed loads of PBs and you've had a really, really good session in the gym, you go home and you just want to eat everything, then fucking hell, eat everything. What's the best that can happen?
Looking at refueling, and that's where structures work great, right? Being able to end up and have some form of a plan, some form of a structure. I know some people will, just kind of plan it out. And I know you've said, plans aren't the problem, right? Being able, whether it's with nutrition or whether it's with fitness. I mean, I have checklists, and that's one of the things I think a lot of people end up and is being able to, tick that box, like you said, and be able to do it. But kind of end up and break that down, right? Like I said, plans aren't the problem, but the execution is, and what that kind of looks like for someone, that maybe is just starting out.
So let's just say, for example, Joe Blogs goes on to ChatGPT and asks ChatGPT for a workout, takes it into the gym, does exactly what ChatGPT says. Now, that could be, I don't know, let's just say, for example, 4 sets of 8 to 10 repetitions on an exercise. That person will just take what ChatGPT says as gospel. They will then just follow that. They may get to 10 repetitions on something and think, oh, well, I've done 10. I'll stop. Because ChatGPT has said so. The crux then becomes, well, at 10, you might have been able to do 12. You might have been able to do 15 because the weight wasn't heavy enough. So then you need to increase the weight to fail at that top end of the rep range, basically. So you need to pick a weight where you get to, again, let's just say it's 10 repetitions. You get to rep 8 and 9 and you feel like you are going to die. Pretty simple, really, as drastic as it may sound. You feel like you are, you're fighting for your life. And that's where the execution side comes in. Because a lot of people just think they're training hard, but they're not. They're not really. you know.
So you always train to failure, not necessarily rep and reserve.
Yeah. Reps and reserve are fine. Reps and reserve serve their place depending on the type of training that you're doing. If you're a power lifter, say for example, you're going to want to train to reps and reserve. You're never going to want to train to failure every single session, because then, you know, come competition day, you're going to be gassed out. You're not going to be able to lift. If you're training for hypertrophy, body recomposition, then you need to be taking the muscle to failure every single time, regardless. And if you're not, you're missing out. Or should I say, your muscle and your body are missing out.
If someone is listening right now and they're feeling stuck, what uncomfortable truth would you say to them? Like, I'm walking in the gym, I'm like, James, I'm stuck, I don't know what I'm doing. What are you going to tell me?
I would first of all tell them to go and look in a mirror and tell them that the only competition that they have is the person looking back in the mirror. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. It's got everything to do with you. And if you want to change, then you've got to put the work in.
It sounds so simple, right? But
it is. It's simple. Yeah. It is simple. There's nothing fucking special about it. It's hard work.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like all of these, you know, again, all of these other coaches and PTs trying to reinvent the wheel. You know, it's fucking simple. You work hard, you get results, end of. You know, if you want it, you work for it. Yeah. You get out what you get out what you put in, basically. You know.
Yeah.
So I guess for anybody watching who might be, you know, wavering or whatever it might be, have a fucking word with yourself. Do you want it or not? It's as simple as that. If you want it, you'll work for it. If you don't, you'll go in, you'll tick a box, and you'll come up with an excuse. Yeah. It's pretty straightforward. It's you know, it's nothing special.
Again,
I love that.
It gets into that uncomfortable side of things, right? And that's where most people end up instead, is they want to put effort, or, you know, structure, I should say. They want structure, but they don't necessarily always want to put the effort in to get the results.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So over the last several years, you have created the PTJM method.
Mm-hmm.
Give us someone that hasn't followed, that is maybe coming, through our channel, give us a 1 to 2 minute pitch as far as, the method.
It's pretty straightforward, really. It's based around 4 things: structure, intensity, progression, and recovery. They are the 4 pillars that I've called them around the method. And I feel like I'm just banging my head against a brick wall, but it's pretty straightforward. It's, if you apply all of those, then you will get results. I guess what makes it different, it's not necessarily the exercises or the movements that people perform, in a gym. Because, you know, people go in and do them and they just fuck about, basically. It's how they're executed, you know, like going back to sort of a couple of warm-up sets. I call them ramp-up sets, whatever you want to call them. Then one set, absolute failure, you know. And that's pretty much it. It's yeah, it's nothing special, really. It's simple, but if you've never been through it, if you've never trained like that, then I can kind of see where people would be a little bit apprehensive, you know. That's why I always invite people to come along and just try it. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. You know, I have to say, most people love it. A few people hate it, and those are generally the people that run off to the toilet and be sick. But again, they're just not used to that level of intensity, I suppose. You know, and sort of like training to failure means, you know, you're pushing yourself to a limit that you are not used to, you know, that your body isn't used to. But most people stop before that because it's comfortable, you know.
And so why do you feel like most people stop long before that, right? As far as, I mean, some people will be like, but I can't. And, you know, I realize the fact of having a coach and pushing them, right? But why do you feel like many people are hitting that brick wall, maybe even quicker than some?
Because it hurts. Because it's not nice. It hurts. And it's your brain telling you that this is uncomfortable, this is painful, this is a fight or flight split second, and, you know, we're going to run. We're not going to face it. We're not going to push. We're not going to see what potential we have. We're not going to, for want of a better phrase, not be a pussy and not back out, you know? Everybody's got the physical potential to train to failure. It's what's up there. It's all psychological when it comes to training like that. Because I guess it's like everything, really, in life, you know? You want what's easy. You don't want to work for it. You kind of want to get it, but you don't want to do the work, you know? And I experienced that a lot, and I guess that's how this is probably going to put me in a bad light, but I guess that's how I weed out who I work with. Because if they haven't got it up there, it's not going to work.
So you can tell right off when you get a client. Whether
straight away. First exercise, first set, I will know straight away if they are willing to put themselves in a position where they are uncomfortable. Because unfortunately, anything worth having comes from being uncomfortable, or whatever fucking phrase, meme you want to fucking use. Again, sorry for swearing. That's what I generally do when I start getting emotional about things.
It's passion. It's passion.
Yes, passion. Sorry, passion. That was the word I was looking for. Yeah.
So you've said that, and I've heard you say this, like one working set done properly beats like 5 average ones. Explain that.
Yeah. So one set done to true failure can yield quite a lot of results. I'm probably going to get a whole load of backlash from all the gym bros out there that'll say volume works better than one set to failure. Well, okay, fair enough. If it works for you, it works for you. I know what works for me. I know what works for my clients. One set done to true failure will yield faster strength, and with strength comes muscular development. It's a sign. It's a biological process, shall we say? So yeah, there's not much more I can say on that. Apart from, yeah, I've done all the volume stuff. I've spent my time training 10 sets of 10, 10 sets of 20, all this shite. Again, you know, people need to find what works for them. But similarly, you need to be out your comfort zone. At the end of the day, you know, it wheels round back to that. You know, I've taken people through workouts where they have not made it past the first exercise with one set to failure because it's too hard. It's too hard for them. They don't want to do it. You know, they want to come in and do their 10 exercises at 4 sets of 10, 4 sets of 12, whatever it might be. Fair play, crack on, you know. But
so your pillar 2 is structure, right?
yeah.
So why is that more important than variety, and why is it, you know, people go in and they program hop, right? So explain that.
So basically the structure side of it removes the decision-making side that people might have, of constantly switching up what they're doing. You know, people think, oh, I need to change my program every 4 weeks. No, you don't. In 4 weeks, your body's not going to adapt. It's not going to change. You need to stick with something for at least 6 to 8 weeks, you know. And I know people listening might think, well, it's only 2 weeks. What's the difference? Well, it's a big difference. You know, it means, you know, over that time, they know exactly what they're doing. You know, they're not waiting for that 4 week mark and then expecting a change. They're instilling habits. Yeah. So they're going in the gym, they're knowing exactly what they're doing, they know exactly what they're there for. They know that they need to be better than the last workout. And that's just the consistency side of it, you know, and consistency then builds progress. It's pretty straightforward. It's again, I'm going to have to say it's pretty simple. It's not, you know, I don't have a, you know, mind-blowing magical answer or whatever it might be. The simplicity of things seems to have gotten lost, shall we say.
And that's where even just like normal daily routine, right? That Sherri and I's clients on, you know, the health and wellness side, right, end up and look at us crazy when we're like, sleep, eat, light, right? You know, they try to end up and overcomplicate the structure of it, you know, and make it very, very complicated. How does kind of, I guess, as a fitness person, which I get it. I mean, I know, you know, my routine looks lower body, upper body, full body, you know, I have that routine down. And so I do have that structure, but explain how structure creates results faster than just motivation ever can.
Obviously, if anybody out there and yourselves have been on social media for the last however many years, you'll have heard a certain person called David Goggins say motivation comes and goes. And it does. Motivation, it depends on the mood that you're in at the time. Whether or not you want to do it, you know, you'll do it, but your mindset can change. But I think going back to what you said, Becky, is the different structure I can make is it gives someone consistency.
Mm-hmm.
It gives them something to follow, and it also gives them the ability to progress, to have progression,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just kind of guessing, you know, without making it try to sound like some sort of poetry reading.
But no, I mean, that's a good point because, no different than we'll say nutrition or, even body metrics.
Mhm.
If you don't have a structure, right, how are you going to know if you're not tracking? How do you know if you're not measuring? How do you know, if you're not doing this or you're just willy-nilly out, asking ChatGPT. I am so, over AI with macros and everything because it's so individualized. That AI doesn't end up and know you as a person. It doesn't know you, and your depth that you're able to go. But if you create this structure, you create your own data, right?
Mhm.
I agree with you. We've done, challenges that are, better than yesterday. And it's simply just, I tell people when they start, if you're only able to do one piece of the challenge, but by the end of the challenge, you're able to do 10, guess what? You bettered yourself, right? And same thing goes with even working out as far as their structure goes. But also, flipping that over is not only just the structure of what they're able to do in those workouts, but the recovery side, which is your pillar 3. Which I love that because my program, I put pillars in there too. So, and recovery is so important, and a lot of people don't put enough emphasis in the recovery.
Mhm.
So why do you say that is also a driver, not just the intensity of people showing up and getting shit done in the gym, but also being able to get the recovery side?
What I always say to people is that the easiest part of this whole process is the workouts. That's the easy part. The hardest part is what happens outside of the gym for the 23 hours that you're not in the gym. What are you doing? Are you eating right? Are you hydrated? Are you supplementing if you need to supplement or if you want to supplement? And basically, the whole training side of it just kickstarts a growth mechanism, shall we say. And in order to make the most of that, you've got to feed it. It's like a car. If you don't give it enough fuel, it ain't going to fucking drive. It's as simple as that. But recovery is where the change actually happens. And I think a lot of people don't give recovery enough credit, shall we say. They don't appreciate it enough. I think a lot of people think the more stuff that they're doing in the gym, the better off they're going to be, or the more steps they're doing, or the more whatever they're doing. It doesn't have to be in the gym. A lot of people think more is better, when in fact sometimes less, but done correctly, can be better than more.
Well, you've said your body adapts to stimulus, not time spent. What do you mean?
So the body reacts to stimulus, so you've got to give it something that it hasn't experienced before, or else it's never going to adapt. It's never going to change. And it adapts to that stimulus that you give it. If you walk in and give it the same shit every day, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Nothing. That can be for weeks, months, whatever it might be. But you've got to give it something that it's not used to.
Well, let's talk about pillar 4. Why most people fail alone, and that's the accountability pillar, and probably one of the most important, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's probably one of the most important and one of the most missed, because I think people, people do think they can do it on their own, which is fine. But the accountability keeps those standards high, and without that accountability, I'm guilty of it. I'll cut corners, I'll miss a meal, I'll not fucking do what I need to do. Do you know what I mean? As I'm sure you guys are. We're all human at the end of the day. But we need that accountability, I think. We need somebody or something to be accountable to keep us on the straight and narrow, shall we say. But ultimately, going back to what you were saying there, Sherri, the pillar that I try and drive into people is, without that accountability, you're going to lose everything. The effort will go, the consistency will go, and then you'll just be back to square one.
I'm sure you see your clients, right, that come to you that, hey, I've been trying to do this by myself, I can't. But I'm sure you've seen such a turnaround on what. Do you have any stories, like, real client stories that you've seen during these pillars?
Yeah, quite a few. I'm obviously not going to name names for GDPR reasons. I've had a lot of people come to me who were basically like a deer in the headlights in the gym. Didn't have a clue what they were doing. Trained with me for 12 weeks. Then all of a sudden, they're waltzing into the gym, talking to everybody, knowing exactly what they're doing. And I kind of I pride myself on losing clients, because that means that I have done my job, and I've gotten somebody to a point where they feel comfortable and confident enough to come into the gym, train hard, go home. There's not much else I can really say about that, apart from that, is that I really have got to the point now as a coach, as a PT, where I enjoy losing clients, which might sound absolutely mental and crazy, but I enjoy losing clients.
Do you ever get them coming back?
Yeah, a few do, because they want the proverbial kick up the arse, because they've gotten complacent and they've fallen back into previous habits. So yes, I do get some clients coming back for a refresher, shall we say.
But you don't like these 6-week shreds, right? Like you.
No.
Why? I'll just say why.
Because I want to know what happens in week 7.
Ooh.
What happens when that person leaves, and it's week 7, it's week 8, it's week 12, it's week 13, it's week 15, it's week 16. What happens then? What happens then is, well, I know for a fucking fact what happens then is they go back to what they did before, and then they end up probably worse than what they were before the beginning of the 6 weeks. But these people, coaches, gyms, touting these shreds and stuff like that. Fair play, because it gets bums on seats, shall we say, gets people through the door. But ethically, as a coach, as a PT, ethically, how does it sit? You know, would I be able to sleep at night knowing that I was just fobbing people off? No, not at all. Not at all. And again, probably going to ruffle some feathers with this, but I don't give a shit. I think if you're happy enough to do that, you're kind of setting people up for a fall. You know. But if people want that, then fair enough. Fair enough. You know, whatever. But I just think, you know, if you're gonna help or try and help someone change, lose body fat, build muscle, it should be sustainable. It should be long term. It shouldn't be because they're going on fucking holiday in 6 weeks' time and they want to look half decent for their photographs, you know. But that's just the way of the world nowadays, unfortunately.
So looking at the future, where's the PTJM method? Where's it going?
Where's it going? Well, I don't want to say world domination. No, I don't. I think it's a tough one because it's such a simple message as far as I can see it. It's such a simple thing. But I think I just want people to not be blinded by the current noise and shit that is circulating around training and, you know, getting better physically on social media. I think long term, I don't know. Again, it's not a seasonal thing, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't just be get in shape for summer. It shouldn't just be get in shape for your wedding. It should be something that you want to do to make yourself better and to set an example, whether that be for your family, friends, peers, children, you know. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of childhood obesity, but if parents maybe set a better example, then we wouldn't fucking have an issue with childhood obesity. But there you go.
Absolutely. I'm pulling up your website currently, so I'm going to run that across the bottom, but it's crazy to think that the whole hour, I mean, it's crazy, but it's not crazy to me because I was telling Sherri the other day that, you know, that there's been times where in previous we would be on meetings for, you know, hours in the community. So, we lose track of time, and especially when we had other members jumping in there and, you know, fun times, right? The good old times. But what is, you know, some final words that you would like to end up and share with people?
I guess I don't want to jump into the whole salesman pitch or anything like that.
No, because but the audience may really want to know.
I mean, that makes me feel really uncomfortable,
yeah.
But like, I'm trying to build this like beyond in person, you know, online coaching systems, you know, various products, ebooks, things like that, you know, that people can use and they can follow it anywhere. Not just having to go to a gym with me, because who's going to want to get on a plane and come and train hard with me? Probably nobody. But I think if anybody's listening to this and they feel stuck, I think the answer isn't necessarily like more information, because there's so much information out there. It's probably applying what you already know, but applying it properly. Because people know what they need to do. They just don't want to do it. But if they do it, that's where things change. It's as simple as that.
I love that. What's one habit that's changed your health forever for you personally?
Putting us on the spot there now. I guess it's having to manage the type 1 diabetes, to be honest with you. And trying to learn how I can make that work for me. Not necessarily how it's something working against me. How can I change it into something that I can use? You know, which I'm still figuring out. And once I figure it out, I'll be a fucking millionaire, because everybody on earth who's a type 1 diabetic will get to know what it is.
Awesome.
Well, we want to thank you. You are in the BNC community, and we love when you jump in, because honestly, this is the middle of the night for you, and so we appreciate.
This is
It's 2 a.m. for him, so we appreciate it.
I'm fighting sleep right now.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
It's not circadian friendly for anyone that is normally listening.
I feel like a bit of a hypocrite, actually, if I look back on what I've just said over this past hour. Yeah. Fucking hell.
I love it. Well, I find it a powerful conversation that needed to be had, right? People need to hear it. I know it sounds simple, but I just think that that's what we have to go back to, is the simple and the basics and things like that, because, you know, you got to fast harder. You got to eat this better. You got to, you know, everything's more. And it's not good. I mean, that's why I suppose all three of us are in the health journey that we are. Right. So, if this episode challenged you and have taught you something new or made you rethink the way you're training, make sure to follow the show, follow James. Okay, we've still got it up on our screen. And for those that are just listening and not watching, you can go to m.co.uk. All right. And I'll put that in the notes in YouTube so they can find you. Also, make sure you leave a review and share this episode with someone who needs it. Your support helps us bring on more incredible guests like James and continue to spread the message of real results, right? Real structure and a long-term change. So don't forget to, you know, like, subscribe, comment, do all this stuff, because it really does make a difference. And we're going to let James go to bed.
I'm wide awake now. I'm absolutely buzzing after this. So yeah, I've probably got a good couple of hours left before I go to sleep. So.
Mercy. Well, as always, thanks, James. We appreciate it.
Much.